I was living the loser's life, and yes, the load was heavy.
Yes, welcome back. From one of the things that we were thinking about, we thought, what does it mean to any individual who is looking at it? Every year, countries around the world are being scored on how corrupt their public sector can be seen to be. Now, there is something called Corruption Perception Index. The key word to remember here is perception, and that's what a number of people are keying into and saying it's perception, something to do with how you feel and what you think of a situation. But I do recall many years ago that Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, he did say that perception is virtually everything.
In fact, I was going to tell you that that's our mantra in public relations. Perception is everything.
Everything. Yes, I recall him saying that. And if perception is everything, then it means perception of corruption in Nigeria is everything to do with corruption in Nigeria. So this morning we're looking at the Transparency International rating of Nigeria as 139th in the world, and we only scored 27% out of 100 in terms of our effort and everything geared towards reducing corruption in Nigeria. So for us to move on this very quickly, we have a set of guests, and our guest in the studio right here in Lagos is Ugo Ogoke, a friend of the house. Good morning. How are you?
And good morning, viewers.
Maybe you didn't recognize him because he used to wear dreadlocks.
Yes. And then in our studio in Abuja, we have Mr. Tunji Awonose. Good morning.
Good morning, Calvin. Good morning, viewers.
Okay. Now, before we talk to our guests, both in Lagos and in Abuja, I will quickly mention that we also have waiting in the wings in Abuja, who will be joining us shortly, Mr. Awal Musa Rafsanjani, who is a member of the Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, whose organization is in strong alliance with Transparency International. But before we do all of that, let's quickly go to Berlin and talk to the regional program manager for Africa of the Transparency International, and that's Mr. Stefan Stassen. He is joining us on Skype. Stefan, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine. Thanks for having me on the show. How are you?
I'm good. Let's start with finding out from you. Nigeria is rated 139th in the world, and we're said to have scored 27 out of 100. Can you give us a brief analysis of how you arrived at these numbers?
Of course. Well, as you said, the Corruption Perception Index, there are two things which characterize it. First, it's based on perception. What that means is that every year Transparency International takes indices compiled by organizations and companies, for example, like the World Bank, but also the Bertelsmann Foundation, risk assessment companies. We do our own survey of business people. Then you also have, for example, in the case of Nigeria, one of the sources we use is a survey by the World Justice Project Rule of Law Index. So we take all of those indices, which ask different questions to experts, both in countries and abroad. And these experts are assessing their perception of corruption on a variety of indicators. What we do is we bring those together, we make a composite indices, and produce this composite score that you just mentioned. 0 meaning a situation where corruption is ever pervasive, everywhere, and this is destroying fabric of life and economy, and 100 being an ideal situation where corruption is perfectly absent. So with a score of 27 on 100, it means that Nigeria is in the lower third of the ranking of the scoring. If we compare Nigeria, like you were saying, to the rest of the world, it means that the country is 139th out of 176 countries ranked this year. And comparing to the African countries, then Nigeria is 33rd out of 48 countries. As you said, it's perception, but what we do, the reason why we mix different indices is because we want perception of different types of people to come together and aggregate in something that makes sense. So you have businessmen being interviewed, you also have country analysts, you have political scientists, both from the country, both from outside, living in the country, living outside. And what we find is that their opinions match with each other and produce a very stable and solid score that allows us to rank and compare countries.
Okay, Stefan, very quickly then, would you say that obviously this is not scientific in any way, it's just perception, it's just what people think?
Well, what is important is that the perception of these are people who are influencing decision makers, making business decisions, investing, not investing in specific countries. So what we do is scientifically aggregate their perceptions. The method we apply is scientific. It's based on strong statistics method, and we've been improving every year the method. And this new score that you see of 27 is something which we would definitely say is based on a scientific method, but it is a scientific method of aggregating perceptions of experts, decision makers, and individuals.
I'm sorry, Stefan, but can you please just repeat what classes of people did you speak to before aggregating this perception?
Right. Well, if we take, for example, the World Economic Forum surveys of business people, those are mostly investors, business people who are active in the country. Other surveys like the World Bank survey, the African Development Bank survey, the Bertelsmann Foundation speaks to country analysts, political scientists, experts on good governance. Then you also have companies who are doing risk assessments for other companies, like the EIU, GI, ICRG, and those have also political scientists, economists, and people who observe countries to analyze the business environment, the social fabric, so that others who consider investing in those countries or engaging in partnerships with those countries can make informed decisions about the situation.
Okay.
So what is important is that we are not the ones making those surveys and interviews, but we're taking surveys and interviews from different organizations which are reputable and that we have been following over the years. In the case of Nigeria for this year, there were 9 different sources that we aggregated together.
Okay, Stefan, very quickly then, explain to us, how did Nigeria end up scoring 27 out of 100? The 100, what does it stand for? And that 27 that was scored, in what?
All right. Well, if we take a situation of 100, you would have a country where corruption is unheard of, where when people go to the administration, for example, to register papers of a company or get working permits or whatever, everything goes smoothly. They are never hassled, and things just go as by the rule of law. In a situation of 0, this would never happen. People would always be hassled for a bribe, for a kickback, when they open a company, when they get a contract from the state. This is what we're looking at. If we take, for example, the data that's provided to us by the World Justice Project Rule of Law Index, some questions that they were asking there, that they were asking the people surveyed, were questions like, do government officials in the executive branch do not use public office for private gain? So here we're looking at the executive branch using its power for private gain. There were questions about the judicial branch doing the same, or the police, the military, and so on. So there is a series of questions being asked about different sectors of the public sector, and do they use power for private gain? This is, for example, the questions that were used by that specific index. What you're looking at with a score of 27 is a situation where basically business investors, experts, business people active in Nigeria are saying that, well, on a regular basis, if you do business in Nigeria, or if you are a citizen in Nigeria, you will be confronted with cases of public corruption on a regular basis.
Okay, so does that then mean the higher your score, the
The
more
higher you
likely
score,
the
the cleaner
tendency
you
of
are,
corruption, or the
and the lower
lower,
your score,
the higher
the
the
more
tendency
corruption
for
is an
corruption.
issue.
Sorry, I missed that.
Oh, sorry. The higher you score, the cleaner the country is, and the lower, the more there is a problem with corruption.
So in essence, Nigeria failed by scoring 27 rather than scoring 77.
Yes, it did.
Okay. Okay. Now, in terms of what has been happening around the world, you rated over 100 countries around the world, 170 what?
176.
Now, with that, have you had any kind of denial or any statement from any of the other countries of the world where government officials were rubbishing your report?
Well, if you find yourself at the bottom of the index, it's never a pleasant thing. So usually people would try to understand and sometimes to criticize the index. The thing is, we're pretty solid on the math and on the statistics and how it was produced. So the best thing you can do if you're a government is just take note that perceptions are that your country is doing really bad on that, and then ask yourself, what do I do? What we see, if we take the case of Africa, is that most of our chapters, analyzing the results, analyzing the context, we're identifying three big trends which are problematic and that government should really be addressing. The first one is corruption in the exploitation of natural resources, be it oil, gas, or minerals. There is a lot of scandals cropping up around those issues. There is a lot of contracts being awarded not properly, of resources being diverted, and this is certainly fueling corruption at the highest level and creating also those perceptions that we are reporting. Another big area of problem in Africa consistently is corruption in public service delivery. It's mothers having to pay just to see the doctor, even though maybe they had insurance, or maybe even though they were granted access, but they have to bribe a nurse to see the doctor. It's not being able to access water because the parts never came to repair it because they were diverted along the way, or someone sold them for their private profit. It's teachers not delivering school books to the learners, even though those were provided for free. So this kind of issue which also is pervasive throughout the continent. And the third area of common trend we found for Africa was impunity. That even though cases sometimes are detected, it's very rare when the judiciary has the independence and the means to actually prosecute and punish culprits.
Okay.
Now, did any country score 100?
No country score 100. We have the three countries at the top scoring close to 100, over 90. We have Denmark, we have Finland and New Zealand, who have each 90, but even those countries are not clean of corruption or scandals. It's just that they have systems in place, they have a rule of law in place which detects corruption, prevents it, and punishes it when it happens. And this is really what every country should be aiming at. I understand, and I'm sure this will be the nature of the debate, but Nigeria has many anti-corruption agencies, many laws. It's really about making those works, give them teeth, give them the means, and let them act independently so that they can indeed detect, prevent, and punish corruption.
Okay, taking a look at your website, it was noted that not only do you do the ratings in terms of corruption perception index, but you also have answers and solutions and suggestions for organizations and also government around the world in terms of how to curb corruption. Do you have any of the government of different countries coming to you to pick up some of your packs that they are able to then apply to the ministries and government departments?
Yes, it happens quite often. Actually, our national chapters, Transparency International is a wide movement working with organizations in 111 countries in the world, 16 in Africa, and governments quite often engage constructively with the national chapters to identify the problems and design solutions jointly. There was such a government retreat lately in Burundi, with the government of Burundi coming together with the partner of TI in Burundi and ourselves to identify what could be done to improve the situation. For example, TI Kenya is working closely with the ministry in their country to develop a new water governance framework to improve provision of water services in the country. So quite often, yes, we are working in partnership to improve the situation, and we are always open to work constructively with governments who are really willing to tackle the issue.
All right, Stefan, thank you very much. We do appreciate your time, and we wish you the very best. And we're hoping the Nigerian government will be in touch at some point to use some of the suggestions that you have.
So do we, and thank you for having me on the program.
All right, thank you. We've been speaking with Stefan Stassen, who's the regional program manager for Africa, working with Transparency International. Now, let's come back to the studio. Ugo, you've heard all of what he has to say.
Yeah.
In terms of where we are as a nation, what's your thought, having heard what Transparency International has said, and probably you've had the chance of listening to Dr. Doyin Okukwe during the course of this week, saying that we actually should ignore all of what Transparency International has said.
And that the fight against corruption is on course.
I think to a very large extent, I want to discount Dr. Okukwe on this because you see a man who smells of partisanship. You know, when a man is talking, you will always know from which side of the mouth he's speaking. You know, so it's clear his job is to speak for government, whether it is justified or not. But that's not even the issue here. For me,
the man is simply doing his job.
I'm not saying he shouldn't do his job, but I think some decorum would be appreciated when we do our jobs, you know. But let's leave him out of it. Let's leave him out of it. It's about Nigeria. It's not about him or his superiors or whatever. It is about Nigeria, and all of us are stakeholders in this. If you look at it critically, my worry is that people are bothering with the statistics, the methodology. That is not the issue. The issue is that Nigeria has tendency towards corruption. Whether you scored 27 or 29 or 21 or even 15, that's not the issue. The issue is that we have tendency towards corruption. If you look at the information we have from Transparency International, you will realize that the average worldwide, average scores from those who scored 90 to those who scored 0, if that would ever happen, for this year, the average is 42, which means that the world is corrupt. First of all, if the world average is 42, then I don't know.
That's still a fail.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the figures too, you'll find out that over 95% of countries in Eastern Europe, over 95% of them scored less than 50%.
So there is corruption in
There is
Europe
corruption.
as well.
You understand what I'm saying? So it is not most prevalent in it may be more prevalent in some parts of the world than others. But if you take the world average of the 176 countries, the average is 42.